everyone, my name is Kevin P. McAuliffe, and welcome to this new training series from Lowepost.com, specifically designed to teach you everything you need to know about the conform process. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what exactly does a conform artist do? What I like to call the conform artist is the bridge. They are the bridge between the offline and the work that the colorist is going to do. Their responsibility is just about everything that encompasses getting an offline into the system that the color grading is going to be done in. And then once the color grading is done, they're going to step in to do all of the exporting or outputting at the end of the process. Now, I don't want to keep this introduction too long. What I'd really like to do is to get into Resolve and show you what you need to do to get your conform set up and ready to go. All right, now two things before we move on. First, as you can see, I am working on a Mac system, but don't worry, for all my Windows friends out there, I will be calling out all of the Windows relevant shortcuts as we move through this course. Now, secondly, the first thing we're going to talk about is creating a database. Now, before I do that, I do need to create a folder to put this database in, and we're going to create a database called garbage. And you're going to see why we're calling it garbage in just a second. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to Command or Alt and Tab into DaVinci Resolve. And what you see in front of you right now is the project selection window. This is the window that will appear every time you launch DaVinci Resolve. However, we have a bit of a problem. We don't have any projects in the window. We also don't have the ability to create a new project, a new folder, or open a project that might already be in this window. Now, why is that? Well, the reason that is because I don't have a database selected. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that you need to decide how you want to work as far as creating databases go. Maybe you want to create multiple databases for multiple clients. Maybe you want to have one database with multiple folders for multiple clients. Now, to call up the database creation option, I'm going to navigate over and we're going to show and hide the databases. Now, you'll see that we have two options for databases. We're going to be using the disk-based option because that is what you will use if you're primarily working on a single system in a single colorist environment. If you're going to be working in a collaborative environment, then you'll want to get in and choose PostgreSQL as your database option. Now, I'm going to come down and select New Database. Now I'm going to be asked, what do I want to do? Do I want to connect an old database or do I want to create a new one? Now for the purposes of what we're doing, I will just create a new disk database and I'm going to call it, appropriately enough, garbage. I'm now going to choose the location of this database, which is on Media 1, and it's down here in garbage. I'm going to say open and I'm going to say create. Once I do that, you'll see that I now have a disk-based database and I can now get in and create as many projects as I want. Now, of course, the reason that I called this database garbage is because I'm actually going to delete it and I'm going to open the database that we're really going to be working with throughout this course. So to do that, I'm simply going to disconnect this database. I'm going to be asked if I'm sure, and I'm going to say disconnect. Now, believe it or not, to open the database, I'm going to come down to New Database. I'm going to connect the database that we want to connect to, and I'm going to come to my Media 1 drive for just 1 second because the database that I'd like to open is called simply enough Resolve Database. I'm going to come back into Resolve, and we're going to call this, again, appropriately enough, Resolve_Database. I'm now going to choose a location for it, which is going to be that same folder that I just showed you, right down here, Resolve Database. I'm going to say open. I'm going to say add. It's going to take Resolve a second or two, but you'll now see here are all the projects that I have in that current database, all for the Conform project that we're going to be working on. So with our untitled project selected, I'm simply going to say open. Now you'll see that we are in the edit module, and I'm going to head on over to the media pool because in just a minute we're going to talk about importing footage, but not quite yet. Before we get into talk about importing footage, I want to talk about your project settings. Now, one thing that's going to be important in this course is shortcuts. We're not going to be constantly navigating to menus when we can utilize shortcuts. And in this case, I'm just going to press Shift and 9 on the keyboard. No matter whether you're on Mac or Windows, the shortcut is the same. And you'll see that we are brought to the project settings into the master settings. Now, we're only going to focus on the timeline format at the top of the window. What's important to keep in mind about DaVinci Resolve's timelines is that they are resolution independent, meaning you can work on any timeline resolution you want at any time. You can switch back and forth between them, literally with the click of a mouse. However, and there's normally a however in these situations, however, what's important to keep in mind is that in the free version of Resolve, you are limited to a UHD timeline resolution of 3840 by 2160. That would explain why, if you attempt to come in and put in a value of 4,400 is the highest that you can go. So keep that in mind when you are choosing your project size. Something else that's very important for me to point out here, and that is the timeline frame rate. What's going to happen with the timeline frame rate is that once you set it here and you import footage into your project, that frame rate is going to be locked in, meaning you're not going to be able to get in and change it. So keep that in mind. It's exceptionally important that you set this correctly now, because if you don't, you're going to run into problems down the line. All right. Now there is something else that I do want to show you, and it's actually located in the general options, and it is the use timeline bins option. And believe it or not, it's not in the conform options, it's not in the audio metering options, it's actually in the color options for some reason. It's actually located right down here at the bottom of the color parameters. Now, what exactly does this do? What this will do is that this is going to help you keep organized when creating timelines in your Resolve project. When you create a new timeline, a new bin is going to be created for you called timelines, and the only elements able to be put in there are timelines. I'm going to show you how this works in just a second. Again, there's a big however. However, what's important to keep in mind is that once you set this, you can't disable it unless you delete all the timelines in your project to then be able to come in, disable this, and then go back and organize things how you want. Now I'm going to show you another way that we can get in and do a similar technique using a different method in just a second. But before we do that, I'm going to leave this checked. I'm going to say save, and I want to talk about importing footage into our Resolve project. Now there's a few ways that we can do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to my favorites to the desktop, and you'll see that we have our dailies folder, our Monday folder, our camera one folder, and you'll see we have all of our footage in here. And at any time, if we want to bring any one of these clips into our project, all we have to do is simply drag and drop. Now, keep in mind as well that if I just drag the interface over just a little bit, let's actually come into our log footage here. I'm just going to grab any one of the clips. I'm going to grab it and drag it right from the folder level into our media pool. And that's another way that we can bring clips in. Now, let's just delete these clips for just 1 second here. I'm just going to remove them. Let's come back to the desktop and let's come to our log footage folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that folder and I'm going to drag it into the media pool. And you'll see that what Resolve has done is it's looked into all the subfolders and brought in all the media contained in those subfolders. Now, I did just mention subfolders, and do you want to know what would be really helpful? What would be really helpful is if when Resolve brought in these clips, it kept that folder hierarchy. Well, it can do that. I'm just going to, again, delete everything. And instead of taking this folder or this bin and dragging it into my project, I'm actually going to right click on it. And you'll see that we have a few options right at the top. Add folder to media pool, add folder and subfolders into media pool, add folder and subfolders into media pool, and create bins. So I'll just select that one, I'll say go, and you'll see that what's happened now, I'm just going to drag my smart bins out of the way here for just 1 second, is that those clips have been brought in the log footage folder, in their respective days that they were shot, in their respective camera rolls that they were shot in, and everything is now super organized inside of the media pool. And let me point out, when I selected the option of use timeline bins inside of my project settings, you'll see that a new bin has been created called appropriately enough timelines. Now I'm actually going to delete all this media once again. Let's just remove everything here. I'm just going to cancel this. We'll just remove it right from there. Remove, there we go, very nice, because what I do want to do is I want to make sure that when I bring this footage in, let's come back to our master settings here, that our timeline's frame rate is set to be, I'm just going to set it to 2997. I actually want it something different than what my media is. My media is 23976. I'm just going to save this. Again, let's just take our folder and I'm just going to drag it and drop it into my project. Now, The reason I changed the frame rate of my timeline is I specifically wanted Resolve to do this. It's telling me that, hang on a second, the clips have a different frame rate than the current project settings. Do I want to change my timeline frame rate and its format to match? Now, this is the moment of truth. If I say change, what Resolve is going to do is it's going to change that frame rate in the project settings, lock it down, and I'm not going to be able to change it. Now, do I want to change everything to match the footage, or do I want to leave it the way that I had it? Now, because I know that I want to work in 23976, that's okay. I'm going to say change. That footage will be brought in. If I go to my project settings, you'll see there is my timeline's frame rate locked out so that I cannot change it. Now, to be honest, I'm fine with it the way that it is. I'm going to say cancel, and let's move on and talk about creating timelines inside of our Resolve project. I'm going to navigate to the Edit module, and I'm going to come and take one of the clips from my media pool. I'm going to take it and drag it and drop it into a new timeline, and I'm going to let go. So a new timeline has been created. Let's head back to the media pool, because you will remember that I did have that bin that was created called, appropriately enough, Timelines, and you'll see the timeline lives there, and it lives only there. Now, keep in mind, if I shift a 9 to call up my project settings, I come down to my general options. Let's come down to the color section. You'll see the use timeline bins is now grayed out. Every timeline I create will go in there and nowhere else. Now, let's delete our timeline. I'm just going to delete it right from here. I'm going to say remove. I'm going to shift a 9. You'll see now that I can deselect use timeline bins and say save. Now, this workflow is fantastic and everything except for one problem. What if you've gotten in after a day's worth of work, you've created, a few timelines, and you now realize that you want to organize all your timelines into a bin? Well, keep in mind that if we come back to the Edit module, we'll just grab another clip here, drag it and drop it into a new timeline. If we head back to the media pool, you'll see there's the timeline located in with all of the other clips. So how do I organize myself, much like I had done before, but after the fact? Well, here's how we do it. We're going to do it with Smart Bins. Now, you'll notice that I have the Smart Bins window open down here in the lower left-hand corner of the Resolve interface. Now, if you don't have access to your Smart Bins, you can get access to them by simply navigating up to the View drop-down and heading right down here to Show Smart Bins. Let's just click anywhere outside of that View menu just to disable the menu. And what I want to do now is I want to show you another little technique that you can use after the fact to get in and to organize your timelines. Now, instead of going back to our project settings, what I'm going to do is navigate to Resolve's Preferences. Inside of the Preferences, I'm going to come to the User Preference, and I'm going to come down to the Editing option. In the Editing parameters, I'm going to scroll all the way down, and what I want to do is I want to create a Smart Bin for timelines. I'm going to say Create Smart Bin, I'm going to say Save, and you'll notice as soon as I do, the timeline immediately appears inside of the Smart Bin. However, it hasn't actually moved anywhere. I still have access to it inside of our master bin. So what exactly is going on here? Well, what's important to keep in mind about Smart Bins is that as much as they are a bin, what they're more so is a filter. It's a way that you can say, oh, okay, just filter through and show me all the timelines that I currently have in my project. Nothing's been moved, nothing's been changed. It's just a way for me now to get in and find things a lot quicker by filtering through my master bin, or conceivably in all of the bins that I have inside of my project. I can click on timelines, boom, they're all going to appear no matter where they live inside of my project. Okay, I think that's a good place to leave off in our first lesson. In our next few lessons, we're going to talk about bringing timelines over from nonlinear editing applications to DaVinci Resolve. Now, we're going to be looking at it more so from a standpoint of finishing the project inside of Resolve. All right, now, as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowepost.com/forums. And if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com.